My name is Vicky Bennison and I'm the creator of Pasta Grannies, and I'm an Italian resident. I bought a house here in Italy 16 years ago now. So I also got married to an Englishman, so I divide my time between here and London. Pasta Grannies in Italy is seen rather differently to the rest of the world because they think it's rather strange that you would be interested in their nonnas. They think, well, everybody knows that this is a great recipe, and it's been handed down through the generations. And there's the assumption, I think, that actually it's going to continue, and they haven't actually thought about how it's going to continue as a tradition. So Pasta Grannies has made national headlines, but it's usually with the angle of, aren't these funny, these peculiar foreigners going around Italy and filming our grandmothers. Having said that, there are quite a few Italians who really appreciate it and then ask the question, why isn't it an Italian actually doing this? Why is it an English woman filming Italian grandmothers? And the answer to that is, I think Italians are so passionate about their food and the food of their particular area. They don't really get the time to examine everywhere else in Italy. So you can show a video to a grandmother of something that's being made in Calabria to a Ligurian, and they'll kind of go, I haven't seen that before. So that's great, it's good fun. So finding the grannies is pretty much a full-time job these days. And to help me do that, I have a granny finder. Her name is Livia De Giovanni. She lives in Faenza, which is in Emilia-Romagna. And she and I sort of work together. I say, Livia, let's go to Abruzzo. And she'll kind of roll her eyes and go, oh, the pastas down there aren't as interesting as the pastas in Romagna, where she comes from, because she's Italian and she's very, very sort of pro her own region. So I say, no, we're going to Abruzzo. And so we'll kind of I'll look at the pastas that I want to film. We'll think about who we already know in Abruzzo. And then we'll work through various organizations to see who they recommend. And we always work through the families, actually. We don't often see them in front of camera, but there are always family in half the village behind the camera. And so it's, our grandmothers don't ever volunteer themselves. It's usually someone else in the family who agrees that they should share it. So in a way, our grandmothers are self-selecting. The ones that feel very shy won't say yes in the first place. And we have even gone to the front door and the granny has changed her mind. So we don't force our grannies into doing it. So we always get the most wonderful, sort of outgoing, adventurous, if you like, women opening their doors to total strangers. So that's very brave of them as well. So our grandmothers are very open and generous with their recipes. There isn't something like, oh, this is my recipe and it's a secret and I'm not going to let you know. I think they're just very joyous about sharing. They're sometimes slightly surprised because they've been making it for the last 70 years. So it's a bit like, the British have baked beans on toast and it's a great comfort food and you don't really think about it. And then someone comes along and says, my goodness, baked beans on toast. So it's sort of that kind of dissonance. It's like, really? This everyday food? You think it's so special? And so we have to go, yes, it is. People always ask me about, who are my favorite grannies? And I say that's like asking who is your favorite child. And I love them all. I'm particularly admiring of all the women we managed to interview who are over 90, because their stories are always so incredibly interesting, and the sort of the adversity that they've experienced in their youth is extraordinary, and so it's difficult to actually single out particular grandmothers. I very much enjoyed Giuseppa in Sardinia, who was a tailor, but she specialised in men's traditional costume. So it wasn't any old dress or anything, it's these beautiful sort of embroidered and elaborate waistcoats and that kind of thing. And she loved it so much she wasn't interested in getting married, and unusually didn't get married until she was about 30. And she then went on to have 4 sons, and she continued to sew for all her family, even the men's underwear. So she's kind of now in her mid-90s and can still fit into the wedding coat that she made for herself. She's refashioned it twice, and it's now a little jacket. And there she is, still wearing clothes from 70 years ago, 60 years ago. So I think that's a wonderful story. We can sort of all learn from her. Pasta Grannies and feminism is an interesting topic. I don't tend to major on it because I've always felt of it as something that I personally feel strongly about. And it's not just the women's stories and what we can learn from them, because quite often our grandmothers don't actually perceive of themselves as feminists. You know, they are very family-oriented and that kind of thing. On the other hand, they're very independent, frugal, and they have stories and reactions to those events that we can all learn from. My initial ambition with Pasta Grannies was to put older women centre stage, because I felt that in the media, food media landscape, there wasn't enough of them, and that we needed to celebrate them more because we take them for granted. They have a whole sort of wealth of experience that we can learn from, and yeah, I felt that, you know, Italian food is global, and we have all these wonderful chefs that say, you know, who are the ambassadors for Italian food. And they all say, oh yeah, it's my granny or it's my aunt who's inspired me, but we never see them. So I wanted to do something about that. Yeah, so that's how Pasta Grannies, it wasn't just, pasta almost is like the vehicle for the stories of these women. I mean, it could have been bread or sweets, and I'll be spherical. Because we always have to eat what they've made. They don't do it for YouTube or anything like that. But so that's what I felt when I sort of got started, was like, I should stop saying to myself, oh, someone should do something about, you know, older women in food media, and it sort of turned out to be me. The stories of women's lives, I think, sometimes need an angle. So pasta making was the angle to that storytelling. So the next question is, you know, how else can you present those women's stories? Is that me? I mean, it could be other women who have stories from their own community. I don't feel that I'm unique in taking that approach. And I, in fact, do have, you know, women from around the world saying, oh, you know, I'd love to do it for Ecuadorian cooking and things. So I always try and help them get started and sort of pass on my experience to other filmmakers and stuff. So from a commissioning point of view, I think it's sort of, it feels a bit strange, but I think it's actually easier when you give yourself a very tight niche and a tight angle to storytelling, rather than just saying women's stories. So could we move Pasta Grannies in a different direction? We could look at pasta making in other communities, and, you know, we went to Slovenia recently, for example. And we could go to Greece and things. It becomes more, from a practical filmmaker's point of view, it becomes more expensive. And you know, there's only 3 people on the team. So there's a kind of whole stuff around the administration of storytelling that you have to consider that, you know, viewers wouldn't necessarily think about. But it's something that we think about all the time. It's like we've been doing this for 6 years. What's the next step? You know, and of course, if viewers have their own ideas. Maybe it's German grannies, Umas, isn't it? That's what you say. Yeah, you know, we'd be open to that. Oh, I'm talking we, I mean I would be open to that. We. But Italian food traditions aren't dying, they're changing. And I think in terms of pasta making, it's no longer a woman's job, which is great. And I think I find that there are lots of young men who want to learn. In fact, Pasta Grannies has about a 50-50 split in terms of viewers, which is great. So the nature of it is that these women made pasta on a daily basis, the grandmothers, because they had to. Nowadays, people have discovered that actually they can have a career and make pasta. There was a generation of women who felt that they had to leave their grandmother's or mother's experience behind when they went out to work, you know, being modern women. And their daughters and sons have discovered that you can have both. You can have a career and make pasta. I mean, from a sort of purely technical point of view of pasta making, you won't have the same muscle memory because, you know, the over 85-year-olds have been making it for 80 years. And so it's like walking or getting on a bicycle. It's something they don't even think about. Whereas I'm speaking from personal experience, when you do start making pasta and you don't do it every day, so you do have to think about it. But at the same time, it's a most wonderful Zen process that I think everybody can have a go at. There's always a pasta dish that you can master. What's cooking for Pasta Grannies is rather a lot, actually. So the first book is hugely successful. It sold over 100,000 copies. It's been translated into 7 different languages. It's being published in France next week. So even the French are eating pasta. And so therefore there's book number 2 that's actually still a year away. Book publishing is a very lengthy process, so in September 22 there'll be a new book. We've got Pasta Grannies coming onto Samsung TV, which is really nice. And what else? I have so much on my plate I can't remember. So yeah, we will also be looking at making Pasta Grannies into a TV series next year. So I can't talk too much about that one, but that's the ambition for it. So I'm keen on longer form storytelling, although YouTube like, you know, longer because they can then start inserting ads and stuff. I want something beautiful with lovely production values and things like that. So that's enough.